Chapter 6, Part 3, Damsel in Distress. The summer of 2006, I took AP Academy, which is a set of preparatory classes. I was signed up to take my first AP classes for my sophomore year, advanced placement classes, which were college-level classes in world history and biology. Murat programmed me a laptop, hooked me up with a wireless network, bought me a printer, and also got me my own small cell phone. I no longer had to go in that freezing cold to the library as often to write my essays. Because it was heavily emotionally dependent on Murat, our conversations over the phone became scarcer upon Murat's request, because he didn't want to enable my dependency on him, which was hard to get used to. It felt like I was running out of breath. On top of that, Murat never allowed me to express my fond feelings towards him because he felt uncomfortable by that gesture, but I was able to write extensively to him everything that was piling up from my life through email, and he was very responsive. Murat much preferred to discuss my emotional roller coasters, conflicts with grandma, and instabilities through email. I was very descriptive there, and it was a major outlet for me from which Murat felt that he could be a better mentor and that I was more attuned to his advice through the digital world. Besides that, Murat felt like a month was a year's worth of experience for me, which was hard to shove all in one phone call. Back then, Murat was an amazing support and very gentle with me. Although I was feeling more profound feelings towards him, he took a very responsible role as an older brother that was always worried about me. My relationship with Grandma was getting worse and worse, so he wanted to hire a lawyer to get me out of there, but everything just fell apart. When I wanted to see Murat wouldn't even entertain the idea because my family had the potential of making a similar case that his mother did of a romantic relationship and so on. The distance, however, unified us more strongly and tested the power of our emotional commitment and its durability towards each other. Murat didn't have to say that he loved me. His actions spoke louder than words, and I felt very treasured and protected under his wing. That summer, I went online to an Israeli chat room called Walla, which I knew about since living in Israel. My nostalgia was coming back to me time to time, and I wanted to talk to my fellow citizens in Israel in Hebrew. I started a conversation with a fellow named Kobi Tashbini, who recently got released from the army at the time. When I connect to my Israeli folks, I feel a strong pull towards them, a magical sense of commonality and defined roots. Our conversations became voluminous and exciting, where slowly but surely he and I became glued to the computer screen, and the time difference did not separate us, which was 7 hours ahead. We corresponded day and night, typing the keys that depicted broad thoughts and emotions that spiraled into magnificent topics of specifics of each other's experiences with sporadic tangents and segues. We did not run out of topics to discuss, and we, of course, conversed in Hebrew, my native tongue. We only took bathroom breaks, shower breaks, and eating breaks. I was stuck typing away in the middle of the night, and Grandma came over asking what I was doing. I just told her, "Homework, Grandma." "It's summer," she answered in disbelief. "I still have homework," I replied to get rid of her, which I did have homework from my AP classes over the summer, but I was able to juggle this occupation too. Kobe was touched by my story and the fact that I was taken away from my own country, that he was inspired to download for me Israeli songs that I remembered since childhood. It was encrypted, and Murat copied all those songs on CDs as he opened the encryption and did something that computer programmers do. In return, I drew Kobe's soldier portrait and sent it to him in Tel Aviv. Kobe sent me a song about a loss of a friend in combat, which he explained to me was very relevant to him because one time in Ramallah, when they were guarding the border, Kobe was sick and he had to be replaced from watching the border. The next day, he found out that that soldier was slashed in the throat by an Arab, for which reason he died. I cried when Kobe told that to me. It could have been Kobe. Another deeply touching song that Kobe gave me that I, to this day, have is a song called Kan Noladeti, Here I Was Born. It is a nationalistic song that we sang in Israel as we grew up, and it made me tear up. You can listen to Festival Team 2004's Kanoladity on YouTube. The major line that I resonate with in the song is when it promises me Sof Lindudai, end of my wandering, that one day I will return to my land of origins. God never allows me to forget my country of origins, and year by year I pray that He will deliver me back to where I came from. One of the few ways to develop a profound appreciation of Israel is to be severed away from it, where both Kobe and I agreed that had we met on a personal level, we wouldn't have struck up such deep connection, because he was Sephardic and I was an Ashkenazi. Because Israel is a very young country, there's a lot of sectionalism going on, in which people of the same type stick to each other and don't mingle as often. Meanwhile, was also hanging out with Mordechai. Mordechai sometimes would act so much younger than his age. We had very blissful moments together in one of the Shabbat days when he had the table all gloriously set up, to which Mordechai would summon the angels in prayer, and we would sing all kinds of sabbatical songs in Hebrew. The atmosphere was serene and pleasant, and the greatest getaway from home. Mordechai was Israeli and spoke Hebrew to me, which was one of the reasons why I treasured his company so much. But sometimes he would confide in me details of which content bore a lot of weight that were way over my age. He told me once that Moshe came to his apartment and said that he really desired a prostitute at the time that my aunt was ovulating, which made me feel outrageously angry. Moshe points out that mother leads a dog life and holds himself on a pedestal. The hypocrisy of that society infuriates me, and if I'm just a small human being that is deeply upset by it, just imagine how it affects God. God will give them a fistful of His wrathful loving kindness, Hasidim, which they call themselves to be. You see, you are not considered righteous in front of God if you would have intercourse with your menstruating wife, but God doesn't mind if you would do so with a non-menstruating whore. The logic just escapes me, people, and what is worse is that the logic is acceptable by my own nation, the piety fires of all times. As if that piece of information was not enough, Mordechai told me that my own mother had slept with him and that she shared the Bedouin experience with him. That was so much to bear that I thought that steam would come out from my ears and nostrils. Speaking of the devil, on October 10th of 2006, Mom arrived. As was duly noted, I did not express the sense of happiness and elation upon her arrival. I remembered all the conflicts we had had in Israel and thought that she would be another burden that I would have to bear on top of Grandma's outbursts. We didn't see each other for 3 years, and within those 3 years, I had a lot to swallow on my plate due to her singular decision regarding me. While she condensed her 3 years into one chapter, not to say that she didn't go through a lot, I need 5 chapters to depict the majorly eventful and much adventuresome life that I had to undergo that I didn't wish upon myself in the first place. With that said, according to Mom, I don't get the right to feel a sort of misery or the remotest sense of melancholy. My emotional dismay, or at least stress level, felt like an overflowing bowl of soup that I had to keep all intact and pretend a sense of gaiety and fun. After all, the entire effort to immigrate to the United States was singularly dedicated to better my state of mind, not to say that there is no truth in the matter, but I also want to disagree that it was all for me. The United States has been Mother's dream from the very get-go, and if it was her dream, it had to be mine without question, in her opinion. Mother, did you even know why I did not accept you warm-heartedly? I asked when she narrated her disappointment in me, and a part of me felt guilty. Because you were bouncing around and you were always busy with Murad, she answered in a guilt-tripping kind of manner, the latter part of the comment. Well, thank you for acknowledging that the bouncing around was a slight inconvenience. I must give credit to that. At least I get that gold star. But I also get to be rebuked for being over involved with a person that I love, which happens not to be mother. As if mother is the only one that gets the right to put someone that should be important at the second priority. Well, excuse-moi, my lady. However, that wasn't the biggest reason why I didn't accept her with jolliness. I told Mom, you lied to me about the vacation. Only you were underage and I was under the authority to have you wherever I saw fit. Weird claim, I thought. If she was under the authority, as she says, to send me wherever she wanted, why did I have the authority or the choice to override her authority by simply refusing to go over the border had I known the truth of her intentions? Why did she have to lie to me to implement her authority over me? And on top of all that, why did my dad have to sign papers to release me if it was all under her authority? Her authority claim doesn't quite add up to me. Does it add up to you folks? Just because people are minors, you get to decide their entire destiny without even consulting their wishes? Is that how the modern world operates right now? To this day, my sense of indignation is not justified by any of my family members, which is the essence of my problem. I already overcame the reality of being sent unwillingly to another country, but being unjustified in my unpleasant feelings of the outcome of mother's authority to this very day is what keeps the entire family apart and distant from me. Mom wanted me to move in with her and my stepfather, Tolik, but I didn't trust her anymore. Would anybody blame me? Even though grandma was a hassle, I preferred to maintain some sort of stability in my instability, knowing that mom could be a loving parent for some short while, and then we would have the same case of whatever we had in Israel. And on top of that, I didn't know how committed and stable her relationship with Tolik was. I knew full well that if there would be something amiss with her relationship with Tolik, she would explode on me. One thing that is different between mom and me is that I don't repeat mistakes if I can help it. Not to say that I wasn't happy to see mother or that I didn't love her. I just needed stricter boundaries with her. My first impressions of Tolik were highly favorable. I thought that he was the best of all mother's boyfriend choices by far, and I only hoped that it would last long. Mom seemed happy at the beginning too. Meanwhile, we were going to the lawyer to try to get me legalized, but the process that we had to take was long. Mom had to just put a petition on me, and we had to wait for an unknown course of time, which made my situation look bleak. The lawyer said that in the worst case scenario, I could just marry a citizen. I thought if it went to that, then the only person I was willing to marry at the time was Murat. Aside on that note, I called mom after school every day and she visited me at grandma's. Sometimes I would go to her house and would help her organize her apartment, but the problem remained that mom had very awkward ways of expressing her mother-daughter love to me. Mom was, as usual, very teenage-like and very impressionable, very energetic and spontaneous. Upon my 16th birthday, Mom greeted me after school, came to me, hugged me, and said, "Happy birthday, even though you could be a bitch sometimes." I was not asking for much, to be honest. I did not ask for huge parties or fancy gifts, but what I at least asked was to be respected on my own birthday. And maybe she did her duty of acknowledging my birthday, but the part that followed made me feel much diminished by her. I just pretended to ignore it, but it did hurt me. This is where I realize right now that whenever I was vulnerable to the inappropriate people, it backfired on me like a bullet, which made it harder for me to be vulnerable to people in my adult life. I also hung out with Tolik, and he at times would confide in me his problems with mom, and I would just listen in understanding. Mom, however, did not engage me in the gory details of her relationship in the beginning. I pretended to be impartial, but honestly speaking, I felt that mom underappreciated Tolik, and that Tolik was ganged up on by the entire family when all he did was help mom immigrate to the country. I did not know all the details of Tolik's misbehavior, and truthfully, it makes no difference now. But Mom's mistreatment of Tolik brought me back to the same memories of Mom's mistreatment of Father, counting every penny and constantly having money arguments. They were married. Why couldn't they consider their earnings as each other's like normal married couples do? The new year of 2007 came, and we spent it all together in Grandma's apartment very pleasantly. I felt genuine daughter-mother bonding. Tolik was very engaging, and we shared the ultimate giggles and togetherness. I thought to myself that it was impressive that even though Mom and I had some small hiccups and bumps on the road, we didn't have full-blown altercations yet. I prayed that it would remain that way. Somewhere around that time, Michael, the guy that I spoke of earlier in the part of my extracurricular commitments, introduced me to Facebook and encouraged me to create a profile. Now, Facebook turned out to be the treasure box where I store all my memories and I write insightful captions. I also upload powerful essays that I have written mainly for me to be able to look back to. Of all the people, I majorly value character growth that could be developed through the introspection of your experiences. If any of you would be interested to glance over my profile, feel free to find me under Smiley Face, which is the profile that has a drawn gypsy girl. I create albums from time to time, and you will be able to see the albums by clicking first photos and then albums after I accept you. I will add the most random people that are interested to delve even deeper into the experience I've gone through to develop some sort of a sense of appreciation of my life and even allow yourself to look into your own heart through the wisdoms that I've arrived at. In my sophomore year of high school, I also had the opportunity to read the best book I have ever been exposed to, The Summer of My German Soldier by Betty Green. For my English project, we were required to read a banned book and write an essay as to why it was banned, and I chose this book from the list. It's a historical fiction story of a young Jewish girl living in Kansas around the time of World War II. Her parents are abusive and neglectful towards her, but you get to see the tensions of the plot unfold as she hides an escaped prisoner of war, a captured German soldier, in her attic. Although she is only 12, she is very precocious for her years, and she falls in love with that soldier who is 10 years older than her as she takes care of him. The plot gets frustrating in the end, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but I flung the book across the room because of its injustice, as I am in the habit to do. I could really relate to that book because I was in a similar situation where I fell in love with a man who was older than me too, and I could really see myself in the protagonist's shoes. One time, because I was swamped with schoolwork as well as playing tennis, I really wanted to drop my AP World History class, but I didn't get to do it just like that. Mr. Ferrara, a very strict teacher, fought for me, and probably because of my freshman year teacher's insanely high recommendation, Mr. Ferrara did not let me go. He said that I would get used to the pressure. I was in consistent consultation with Miss Harvey afterwards, and I told her that the pressures at home, as well as about Mom coming over and her comment during my birthday that made me remember Mom's comment in Israel of wanting to abort me. Miss Harvey looked at me and said, "You do know that you are God's creation, though." I cried at that reassurance. Then I told Miss Harvey about some incident that happened to me in a very nonchalant manner. I was waiting for a friend that I was scheduled to meet with, and I was pacing back and forth as I was waiting, and in front of me pulled a car whose driver was speaking in Russian, asked me to get in and he would give me a ride home. The building of my house was right in front of my eyes, and I had no idea why he was bugging me. He was asking me intrusive questions about where I lived, and I was looking at the building from the horizon and just said that I lived close and didn't need a ride. He was strangely insistent, and I explained to him that I was just waiting for a friend to do homework. Homework? He asked in surprise. After I said the word homework, he left me. Miss Harvey was very concerned about that experience, and she got me out of class to talk to the police officer of the school. What the police officer explained to me was that I could have gotten kidnapped by that man, and the police officer unexpectedly jerked from his seat. That scared me and got me to cry. The police officer wanted to implement fear in me so that I would run like fire at situations like that. The two of them explained that I had to be careful and not talk to strangers. I very much learned my lesson. The most fascinating class that I have ever taken in my high school career has been AP Biology. I tore the pages of the textbook into pieces, figuratively speaking, and record myself as I read chapter by chapter, following all the intricacies of the anatomical processes as if I could see how the living minutiae work, which are things that we take for granted that work on their own and keep us alive on a daily basis. Because it was an AP level, the textbook went into great depiction of detail. What was mostly fascinating to me was the brain. As the AP exams came closer, I found out that there were certain preparatory resources at Barnes & Noble that I could use. I went to Barnes & Noble and bought study flashcards for AP Biology and AP World History. As I was meandering through the store aisles, I bumped into some guy that recognized me, but I couldn't recognize him. "It's me, David Davidson," he said reassuringly. I strained my eyes to try to recognize him. What a transformation he has gone through again. His head was completely bald and shaven this time, and his stride was masculine and deliberate. "What happened to you?" I asked in breathtaking wonderment. He looked extremely handsome, and it felt that he found his niche where he belonged. "I became a police officer," he said in confidence. Who would have thought? And I sat and doubted him. He told me everything that he had gone through lately, and then he made a remark about me. "When you are walking, you are slouching, looking like a very good victim to tackle." "So what should I do in this case?" I asked him in curiosity. You should puff up your chest and always walk purposefully, looking forward so as not to look lost even if you are lost in your thoughts. You have to make sure you don't look it." Talking as he demonstrated, then he went further into the defense tutorials, showing me all kinds of moves to defend myself. I thanked him, congratulated him, and left. Since then, I have never seen him again. Around the beginning of summer of 2007, the end of my sophomore year, I found an office administrator volunteer position at the Metropolitan Nursery Center in the building where Grandma attended adult daycare. I filed records mostly and organized offices. I found it very important to volunteer to build my resume despite my hopeless future of being undocumented. With that, I had extensive summer projects over the next batch of AP and honors classes that I was signed into. On top of all that, I found a humbly paying babysitting job from a lady that coincidentally turned out to need one when I was hanging out at a kid's playground. The mother's name was Yolanda. That summer, however, was a very fateful period of my life, unfortunate to overcome, but in the long run, very resolving to my desired destiny, where events tumbled over me and started piling up to be unexpectedly toilsome and traumatic on my psyche. In June 22nd, 2007, Friday night, Mom came to spend the night, all flustered and riled up after a seemingly final series of fights with Tolik. I tried not to get in her way and just tried to focus on homework. Because the ambience was very much rattled by her presence, it very much distressed me. But I did not let it show. It felt like being under a stampede of running elephants in a jungle that you just had to watch yourself where you stepped to avoid yourself from being stomped over by them. I put my greatest efforts to not side with anybody and not intervene as I forcefully tried to gather all my mind power to focusing on those conditions. The following morning, June 23rd, is supposed to be quiet Saturday when I usually allow myself to sleep in and relax. Mom still hadn't finished complaining about Tolik to Grandma with loud screams and convictions. Mom's complaints of toilet were awfully similar of those of my father, not to say that Dad is a perfect man, but my point is that it was the same old to me. I was kind of annoyed by Mom's inconsiderateness of my sleep, but I brushed the annoyance over my shoulder and just sat down to eat what Grandma had prepared for me for breakfast. While I was eating and slowly savoring my food, Mom was in the shower, at which moment the phone rang, and it ironically turned out to be Tolek, who told me that Mom stole $31 worth of coins that Tolek had been collecting through the period of 6 months. That is when I started being ashamed of Mom's actions and lies, accusing him of stealing from her, and Grandma was buying all of it, at which point I could no longer stay uninvolved with a full conscience. I hung up the phone and complained to Grandma what Mom did to him, and that Mom wasn't as innocent and righteous as she sounded. Mom overheard the conversation. She got out of the shower and belligerently admitted that she did that as a vengeance of him stealing $1,000 from her. Through my experience of Mom's credibility, I thought that it was a dramatic exaggeration, for which I boldly told Mom that I did not believe her anymore. That is when Mom resolved to beat me up to monstrous measures because of the audacity that I had to not side with her. She pulled on my hair, got me on the floor, and choked me while ripping a patch of skin from my right knee calf as she bit it off, and I thought that the end of my days had arrived to take me into non-existence. Although the entire sense of pain felt eternal, she let go of my throat and my knee as I screamed out of ultimate sense of pain. As a finishing touch, she ripped my favorite nightgown that I was wearing and threw the plate from which I ate. I was so heated up that I was not going to let that slide. My heart was pumping so outrageously that it felt that it would jump out of me. It all happened in a moment. I dialed the 911 dispatcher, screaming to the phone that Mom was beating and biting me. That was all that I managed to say, because Grandma snatched up the phone and hung up. Terrorized of the situation and supremely angry and befuddled of Mom's savagery, I knew that my sole focus had to be to get out of the house as fast as was physically possible. I quickly dressed up, grabbed my cell phone, and, completely panicked and frazzled, headed to Mordechai's apartment. Once I finally got to his door, it didn't knock. I thumped with the full strength of my palms at the door in urgency and cried hysterically for Mordechai to open the door. Very much shocked, Mordechai opened the door to see my hair all over the place, my face, chest, and knee covered with dripping blood, and bruises about to form on every inch of my body. I wanted to call the police from his house, completely forgetting that I had my own cell phone to do that, but Mordechai convinced me to not call, saying that it would cause more problems on everybody. He said that it was a miracle that he was in the house at such a fitting time, because usually he was going to a synagogue on Saturdays to pray, but he was feeling kind of achy, which thank goodness he did not go anywhere. Mordechai cleaned me up, and Murat called me in a request to find my whereabouts and tell him what happened, as he found out from Grandma's looking for me. I told him everything, every single detail. I did not miss a thing, as the experience was so vivid that I had to get it out of me, or else I was going to explode. But after all that disturbing narration, for some weird reason, I asked him to not tell anyone. Murat didn't just not listen to me, but he called Child Protective Services. Right after the experience, I started having severe auditory and visual hallucinations of Mom being everywhere. I was locking and bolting the door, walking in utter paranoia wherever I went. I hid at street corners to avoid possible sightings of Mom. 3 days after the altercation, I saw a lady who stood and waited for me at the entrance of the senior house building, introducing herself as a CPS worker named Sue. She saw in terror my bruises and scabs that were all out in the open and fresh looking because I happened to wear a short skirt thigh length as I was coming home from volunteering. After the altercation, I was so haphazard that I was slipping into anything, whether it was stylish or not. Sue asked me what happened, and at first I resisted to say. Eventually, I told her everything, and she insisted that I press charges as I was of age to do that. I didn't feel comfortable to press charges against Mom, but she convinced me that it was necessary. A male police officer came and brought a camera, and Sue took pictures of every bruise on my body that was also in inappropriate places for which the police officer had to step out. Then the police officer took my police report and told me that they got the interrupted call that I initially made, and they were able to track the location because it was a home phone line from which I made the call. He further explained to me that they had in record of certain police officers who went to check the location and saw my mom, but they couldn't do anything because they couldn't locate me anywhere. I guess that my grandma didn't bother to look for me at the time because her hands were full with the visiting police officers. The police officer that took my report told me that I was very brave to go through the process. A day after that incident, Marat suddenly called me and told me that he was waiting in the lobby for me to open the door as he wanted to talk with Sue face to face. He was so tired of how 2 consecutive social workers had closed the case and made it unfounded that he was determined to pitch in his 2 cents about the matter. I didn't care why he was there. I was just happy to see him. When we summoned the elevator and went inside of it, Marat maintained his distance from me as he stood in one corner of it and I was in another. Sue was supposed to come at a certain hour with a translator to my grandmother's house, and until then, Marat and I hung out at Mordechai's. That day, I coincidentally was wearing another short skirt, thigh length, a shirt, and a button-up shirt over it as well. Before coming into the house with Marat, I accidentally buttoned up my shirt wrong, which I did all unconsciously, just a damsel in distress. When Marat tried to just simply negotiate and advocate some certain details, both Sue and the translator were suspicious of his intentions and accused him of having a romantic relationship with me because I appeared with an off-buttoned shirt, which they thought that I had undressed in front of Marat, as the off-buttoned shirt seemed to be at the evidence. Marat didn't touch me with even a finger all this time, but regardless, they chased him away, and I was so exhausted of everything and very much dehydrated that I was starting to show signs of passing out. She took additional pictures of my disastrous looks and got me in the ambulance while the translator was going into all kinds of unprofessional hysterias. That very same day, I found that the translator got recklessly ran over by a bus as she was crossing the street while talking on her mobile phone, for which reason I felt very guilty of because it happened right after her visit with me. Regardless, when I got to the hospital, I talked to a psychiatrist who asked me if I was suicidal, to which question I responded no, despite my levels of desperation. I explained the details of the altercation again, and the psychiatrist referred me to a psychologist and prescribed me 2 types of medications. The first medication was to get rid of the hallucinations that I talked about, which I knew were hallucinations because I was locking up the door with a deadbolt when Grandma tried to come in, telling me that there was not a sign of Mom anywhere, while I thought I was clearly hearing Mom's voice from downstairs, and also because Mom couldn't be in so many places at once. Another medication was for Mom's bite on the knee. The psychiatrist explained that I had to take it religiously to fend off chances of bacteria from Mom's saliva. Meanwhile, Sue got a restraining order against Mom for half a year through the court, but Sue hesitated in taking Mom's custody of me because she was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get legalized if the custody was taken. On top of that, Mom had to plead guilty and pay a $2,000 fine to the government for the physical and emotional distress that I had gone through. One would think that should be the end of my misfortunes, but unfortunately my aunt became very vengeful for putting mom through so much legal trouble, and she also justified mom for beating me up for not siding with mom on her conflict with Tolik, whom my aunt also detested. Therefore, the circus continued, and Damsel in Distress episodes were far from over.